Hi, Dr. Huber. This is the remote lab activities for the pediatric physical therapy case. So the age ranges that I chose were children from 0 to 12 months, 1 to 3-year-olds, and then also 4 to 5-year-olds. So the first exercise for our 0 to 12-month-olds was tummy time with toys. So this is really important for this age range. Excuse me, many of them don't really tolerate this position, so trying to make it fun and interactive is definitely important. So with this, we're placing the child prone and on their stomachs, and then what I said to do was place an object outside of their reach and then prompt them to reach for it by either shaking it or rattling it or trying to catch their eye with the object that you have and kind of have them reach for it. So the purpose of this exercise is kind of to increase that head and trunk control with these children. This is a precursor for prone pivot and then anything else like crawling or creeping. So the muscles that are used in this exercise are head, neck, and trunk extensors, while you're also getting shoulder flexors as they try to reach for it. And if they are able to then grasp onto it, you are getting some wrist and hand flexors, and those are both intrinsic and extrinsic. So the sensory integration can come into the texture of the toy that they're using. You could also change up the color, so just getting these children exposed to a bunch of different sensory stimuli is definitely important. And then because the toy can either make noise or not, that could also be another way to gain some sensory. And then the next one I have is reaching in unsupported sitting. So with this one, you're placing the child in a sitting position. So with this one, you can support them from the trunk or their head if they cannot fully support themselves, but at this point I would like them to be able to be unsupported, and with this I would have them either in a long sit or a cross-legged sit. And with cross-legged you're having a little bit of an increased base of support, but what I'm trying to avoid is that W sitting position. So with this, what I'm doing is I'm placing objects out in front of the child, so they're sitting in that W, or they're sitting in that cross-legged support, and then I'm prompting them to then reach forward for the toy, so I can then aid in the forward trunk flexion or lateral trunk flexion if I place the object out to the side. And then also allowing the child to grasp the object gets you that fine motor, but the gross motor is mainly coming from the trunk and then the arms as you try to reach. I also said that you could get some proprioception involved with this, so let's say they do fall outside of their base of support and they do land on their extremity, at least being able to weight bear through that extremity is a great way to get some proprioception going on. You're also working on a lot of flexibility, so you really need to work on the trunk extensors and their flexibility in order to allow for more trunk flexion, and then the same thing with the shoulder extensors. You need to make sure those are flexible in order to get that reaching motion involved. I think that addresses that. So now on to our 1 to 3-year-olds. The first exercise I have is catch and toss with different colored balls. So for this one, it's more like the upper age range. I'm thinking some more like the 3-year-olds. So what the therapist can do is use different colored balls with names, and then the child would know. So like I was thinking primary colors, so red, blue, green, and yellow. So I don't know, their vocabulary, while it's expanding, is still fairly small. So just making sure that they do know those 4 colors. And then the therapist would start out with none of the balls, and the child then has all of the colored balls. And then what the therapist would then prompt the child to do is, can you toss me this color? So let's say the therapist says, can you toss me a red ball? So you're getting cognition involved because they have to recognize which ball and which color you want them to throw. You're then getting the fine motor as they're grasping the ball, and then you're getting gross motor as they're throwing the ball to you. So that's one step of it, and then the next step is then catching it. So once the therapist then has all the balls, you're going to say, as the therapist, okay, I want you to catch this ball. Now, you're not going to throw them a ball and say, I want you to catch a green ball and it's a blue ball, but just prompting them with the same colored ball as what you're throwing would be important. So you're also getting a lot of coordination with this. So a lot of coordination with the throwing motion, or if it's an underhand toss too, you're still getting a lot of coordination with that. The fine motor comes from the grasping, and then the gross motor comes from all the control at both the trunk and then also the shoulder as you are throwing and then catching the ball. So the child can start with actually catching the ball against their chest. That's usually the normal developmental way to catch the ball. And as they progress, you're working more and more on catching the ball with 2 hands, so that's working a little bit more fine motor than gross motor, just catching it up against the body. Next is picking up animal toys in a sandbox. So with this one, the sandbox is elevated, so the child is standing at the sandbox. The child is then going to sift through the sand with their hands, trying to locate all the animals. So with this one, I would bury the animals a little bit deeper. So they're getting some sensory integration by having all this stimulus come in with the sand, but then they're also getting a little bit of proprioception because they don't know where, or like visually, they won't be able to see where their joints are in relation to the rest of their body. So since they're underneath the sand, and with that, they then have to judge and figure out, is my hand open or closed? And then once I locate the object, being able to grasp it and then pull it back out. So I thought this was interesting and fun, way to kind of get some of that integration going on. Vision does come into play a little bit with if you place some of the animals towards the surface. And primarily you're getting a lot of wrist flexors, wrist extensors, and then the hand intrinsics. You are getting a little bit of strength involved with this, as the sand does provide a little bit of resistance. So as they're digging around, they're getting a little bit of resistance involved with this. Lastly, we're on to our 4 to 5-year-olds. So this one was a lot of fun to create because these children are a lot more advanced at this point. So the first one I wrote in was an obstacle course. So I wrote up this as an obstacle course that's carried out over the length of a room, and you're placing different density foam pads and plastic, like little rocks, that they would then step on. Kind of the game, the floor is lava, so don't let your feet touch the floor. And then at the end of it, the child will retrieve a ball, and so you're stating, I want you to retrieve the red ball at the other end of the course. So they're getting some cognition as you're telling them what ball to get. They then have to use gross motor and fine motor to cross the obstacle course, and that's shifting their base of support. So they're recruiting a lot of muscles in their ankles, so both plantar flexors and dorsiflexors, while they're also getting a lot of hip flexors, trunk extensors, and then knee flexors and knee extensors. So they're really recruiting a lot of their body while using this obstacle course. And then they're getting that fine motor by grasping the ball. And then they're getting a lot of coordination as they have to multitask and then bring that ball back to you. So they're focusing on both crossing it with their legs, but then also holding on to the ball the entire time. So I said that the uneven surface challenges the child to use their muscles to stabilize themselves while propelling themselves forward through the course. So you're really getting the best of both worlds with that. The last one I wrote in was a wheelbarrow drag race. So with this one, if you've ever seen a wheelbarrow race, I shouldn't have wrote this in because I can't pronounce it, is the child starts in a prone position, in more kind of like a push-up position, and then the therapist or somebody else would then hold on to the child's legs and then have them walk on their hands. So I also wrote in to have like different colored dots. So like the green dot, their right hand has to be on, and the red dot, their left hand has to be on, kind of like Twister a little bit. So with this exercise, there's a start line and a finish line. I said 20 meters apart. With this, you're really getting a lot of proprioception as they're weight bearing through their joints, or weight bearing through their upper extremity. So normally they're really getting a lot of weight bearing through their lower extremity. So I thought this was a good exercise to try to get more of that weight bearing through the upper extremity without it being their entire body weight placed upon it. Now this is a little bit more advanced, so hopefully it's really going to work on some strength. So any child that's a little bit weaker and unable to support a good chunk of their body weight probably won't be able to do this exercise. But it also works on neck extensors, trunk extensors, their core, some shoulder flexors as they have to propel their arm forward, coordination as they have to alternate one arm after another, and then endurance, because this exercise isn't just one and done. Like you have to cover a fair amount of distance with this. So those are my exercises for the 3 different age ranges, and I hope you like them. Thanks.